As markets start out in 2019, tech remains a major theme. Having led the surge to new highs earlier in 2018, the sector's been at the forefront of the declines at the end of last year. With the recent warning from Apple of a slowdown in China and evidence as well of a slowdown in the wider global picture coming through from economists, where now for the sector? Pelham Smithers joins us now from Pelham Smithers Associates, where he's a specialist in Japan tech, but also follows global tech trends. Pelham, good to talk to you. Happy New Year to you and your colleagues. I want to begin first of all about what happened in 2018, just so we can get ourselves up to date as to where we are.
Well, it was a tale of two halves, to use that great footballing analogy. We started off fantastically well. There was a lot of interest in mobile gaming. We had Fortnite and we had player-unknown battlegrounds, and these were driving interest in technology, and we were seeing strong demand for phones, for PCs and stuff like that. And then from the second half of the year, it all went sour. We started to see a collapse in memory prices. We had some weak smartphone sales out of China. Ironically, that was a quarter which Apple did quite well. And then more recently, we had all sorts of stories about discounting of Apple phones in Asia and stuff like that. And then suddenly the news out a couple of days ago that Apple didn't expect to meet their revenue forecasts. So as I say, it started off well and it's gone sour since.
Apple mentioned specifically China, but do you see evidence from where you're sitting of a global slowdown that's going to affect tech, or is it just really all about China?
At this stage, it looks to be primarily about China. Global smartphone sales have been down very slightly from last year's level in unit terms, but in overall value terms have actually been up because, you know, we had these high-priced phones come through. China has been operating slightly differently for some time. They probably peaked towards the end of 2017. So what we're now seeing is a story which has been out in Asia for 12 months, which people have been worried about but not really been able to crystallize, and now they can.
Yeah, I want to bring up a share price chart, if I can, of Apple, because I think this illustrates keenly about what you're saying. And this is the big declines that we've seen away from the record highs at $234 a share. Now here we are now at 144.66. I think actually you've been quoted recently as saying this could actually this year trade as low as 117. Well,
that would put it on the same low valuations it's been in the past, sort of 6 times enterprise value to operating profits. So that's plausible. Not, you know, you can't predict. I'm going to absolutely pick the bottom, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody turned around to me who said, yes, no, that was right.
Yeah. As I said, they've majored on China. You've expressed your concerns or some of the worries about the global markets, but is Apple a unique case? I mean, we have been reporting a lot over the last year or so about the elevated levels of purchase of the handsets, and that, to me, seemed like they were impossible to sustain at those sort of $1,000 levels.
I think that's been proven to be correct. When the iPhone X first came out, there was a bit of questioning about the $999 price range, and then it really got pushed to $1299 and stuff like that with the XS Max, depending on how much memory you had with it. And somewhere in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, there's been a sea change. And one of the problems, I think, is that Apple's own pricing was highly problematic, because you could pick up an iPhone 7 very cheaply. An iPhone 7 is a really nice piece of work. When it came out, it was one of the best phones of its time. It still holds its own really well, and you can get that for about 1/3 the price of the top range one. So Apple's own pricing, I think, put it into trouble.
Yeah. What about the rest of the sector? I'm thinking here about some of the major competitors. Let's take Samsung first of all. Would you see Samsung suffering the same problems as Apple, or do you think there's going to be somewhat of a reflective glow for Samsung on the back of Apple's misfortunes?
Well, 2 things about Samsung. First is that at present we don't know if the Apple problem extends beyond China. They were very specific in their shareholders' letter that this was a China-related issue. Samsung has very little business in China when it comes to smartphones. Their share has collapsed in competition with the likes of Huawei. So that's not going to affect them. However, they're actually coming off a very bad year on the handset business because they tried to price their flagship phone last year very highly. It was trying to compete for the iPhone 10 model, and so the Galaxy S9 was actually a considerable disappointment. Now, coming to this year, they have an interesting opportunity because their flagship phone this year is going to be a 5G phone. Now, it could be too early. It could just come at the right time, but it means that they will actually be able to maintain pricing while saying, this time we are delivering something new. It'll be interesting to see if it works.
Yeah, you mentioned 5G. I know we're trying to roll out 5G here in the UK, and one of the big companies that's bidding for that contract is Huawei, the Chinese handset maker and network maker. Huawei, let's take a look first of all at Huawei and how it fits into the Apple-Samsung model. Of course, it's China-based. Is that likely to be the phone that's going to win out globally?
The forthcoming P30 is a really interesting phone because it is going to really be the leader in rear camera technology. They're putting a lot of effort into that. It's also going to be a 5G phone. Funnily enough, a lot of the technology comes from here in the UK. A company called Cambridge Mechatronics is behind some of this phenomenal technology that's supposed to be going into the P30. So it's going to really represent a threat for people who aren't sort of stuck in the Apple infrastructure, and also, again, for something like other Android makers like Samsung.
Huawei as a network company, is it tarred with this, not tarred, but has it got a problem with the image that China has in a nation that wants to become involved in local affairs? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, about the 5G rollout here in the UK? One has to question Huawei's interest in this with that sort of background.
Well, I think there are big problems with this. I'm not sure necessarily that there is actually anything wrong sort of espionage-wise with Huawei's equipment. I mean, only a few people will know that. But the image, of course, as you've said, is detrimental, and I think it's very difficult if you're a UK service provider to be able to take it on trust at this point that the system is okay. And here is the problem for if we're going to roll out 5G in the UK, 5G almost certainly requires quite a lot of expenditure at the home end. It's not like just putting in a sort of a router box in your, in a cupboard. You're probably going to need to have an external antenna, a bit like a dish for the satellite, but it'll look more like a bulb than a dish, and that equipment is at present looks to be set to be substantially cheaper if provided by Huawei. And it's going to be interesting because we would all benefit from having 5G, and the telecom companies would be able to reduce their costs quite considerably if they can get it. But the process is wasted if it's too expensive to install the user side end. So there is this, I think, big issue. So my suggestion, or expected solution, is that there is an agreement that it can be used on the consumer side, and maybe the user side, the controller side, that side will go to other people like Nokia, Ericsson, NEC.
I said at the top you follow Japan tech in specific, but I know obviously if you touch on global themes as we've discussed. What are your picks for 2019? Are we going to see a reversal of the back-end dismal performance for tech, or do you think we're stuck at these new levels and it's going to be hard to shift?
I think you're going to have to split tech up into companies who have been very heavily involved in the consumer story, and obviously the Apple issue is going to impact that psychologically, if not absolutely, for quite a while. But there are a number of companies who are involved entirely on the enterprise side, and in a world in which there's shortages of labour worldwide, you're probably trying to look for increased cost efficiencies. 5G around the corner provides you with an amazing opportunity to move into big data and all sorts of software advances. We think that that's where you should probably be looking now.
What sort of companies are we talking about there?
They fall into sort of two categories. So you've got equipment makers such as I mentioned NEC and Nokia. They are obviously going to be behind the 5G rollout, but they're also going to be involved in all sorts of IoT related stuff, to industrial efficiency and stuff like that. So that's a line. And also we think on the sort of enterprise software, companies like Oracle and perhaps data-related companies like NTT Data in Japan are going to be the ones that will be providing sort of the software side to that 5G IoT solution.
Okay, look, we'll have to leave it there. But Pelham, in the meantime, thanks indeed for joining us. Pelham Smithers from Pelham Smithers Associates talking there about the outlook for 2019 in the tech sector.